At 4:12 a.m. on December 29th, the silence finally broke, and honestly, it felt like the kind of moment that makes your chest tighten. Because federal radios crackled alive as FBI and ICE agents surrounded a quiet suburban mansion, the home of James Jack Holloway, a man once trusted to protect America's veterans. And when agents stepped inside, it didn't feel like a house at all. It felt like a tomb built from stolen honor, because hidden beneath the staircase was a vault holding $6 million in tightly wrapped cash, 20 property deeds, and a leather-bound ledger listing 5,329 veterans marked as deceased or relocated. Except every single one of those names belonged to someone still alive, men and women who served, who sacrificed, and were quietly erased, so their benefits could be drained without anyone noticing. And the agents just stood there frozen, realizing this wasn't paperwork fraud. It was the blueprint of a predator, and the first real crack in an empire built on forgotten lives. But the investigation had actually begun earlier, with a silence even heavier than a dawn raid, when Robert Cal Whitmore, a decorated Army veteran who survived firefights overseas, was found dead in his small Chicago home with an empty bottle of sleeping pills beside him and a denial letter folded against his chest. A letter claiming his benefits were exhausted, even though FBI auditors later found $70,000 still untouched. The final withdrawal signed not by Cal, but by Holloway himself. And in that moment, agents understood Cal's death wasn't an isolated tragedy, it was a signal. And as they dug deeper, the case stopped looking like fraud and started looking cold, engineered, almost industrial in its cruelty. Because inside a DEA evidence room, a seized cartel laptop revealed a file titled U.S. Veteran Pipeline. Rows of names, dates, airport codes, and dollar amounts showing over $167 million siphoned from veterans' accounts and funneled through shell companies into the financial veins of the Sinaloa network. And Holloway wasn't skimming the system, he was feeding it. But what truly terrified investigators wasn't the money, it was the disappearances. Because over 18 months, 97 vulnerable veterans suffering from PTSD had been declared medically incompetent with a few keystrokes and forged signatures, turning living soldiers into bureaucratic ghosts whose trails led not to clinics, but to flight manifests hidden in a private O'Hare server, coded routes ending overseas, where investigators uncovered holding warehouses disguised as care facilities, places where veterans were drugged, stripped of IDs, and sold to construction bosses for $20,000 each, cheaper than machines, easier to replace. Survivors describing 16-hour shifts in brutal heat, sleeping on concrete. Guards calling them units instead of men. One rescued veteran whispering, "We weren't patients, we were inventory," and only 12 were found alive. The rest vanished unmarked. And by the time analysts mapped the full pipeline, it was clear Holloway's empire couldn't be dismantled with subpoenas. It would take a war. So at 3:58 a.m. under a gunmetal sky, the largest veteran-related enforcement operation in Chicago's history launched, with 300 federal agents standing shoulder to shoulder in a converted warehouse as a digital map lit up 14 targets across 7 countries. And at exactly 4 a.m. the order came down. Iron brake is green, execute, and everything moved at once. From a violent firefight in a Chicago warehouse tied to Holloway's shell companies, to raids in Nevada uncovering crypto wallets and notes scheduling the next disappearance, to ICE units in El Paso finding forged medical passports and sedate on non-compliance orders, to UAE authorities breaching a construction camp in Dubai where trafficked veterans stood blinking under floodlights, whispering, "Is it over?" And for some it was, but for many it was already too late, because what this case revealed wasn't a rogue official. It was a machine built to harvest human lives. And at the center of it all stood a man the public once trusted to protect those who had already given everything. Chicago's financial district is where the final strike landed. And honestly, this was the moment everything started to feel real, because agents hit an offshore coordination office and seized encrypted ledgers that tied $340 million directly to cartel intermediaries and 34 international properties bought with stolen veterans' benefits. And by 4:29 a.m. Operation Iron Brake had exploded across 3 continents. By 4:31 a.m., the so-called empire of Iron Jack began to crack, even though the man himself was still out there and dawn was closing in. And if you support the agents who risked everything, you really should tap like for them and comment honor the heroes, so this reaches more people. Because once the gunfire faded and the last breach team radioed clear, agents knew the raids had only shattered the outer shell. Since the real machinery of Holloway's empire wasn't guns or guards, it was money. And money doesn't run, it leaves trails. So forensic accountants started where empires usually end: offshore holdings. And the first major break came from a laptop seized in Nevada, an encrypted archive that took the FBI cyber unit nearly 8 hours to crack, revealing a portfolio of $340 million spread across Cyprus, the Cayman Islands, Malta, and Singapore, with transfers labeled in cold, clinical language like Veteran Reallocation Fund, Medical Reassignment Grant, and Posthumous Settlement, words that sounded clean, but were really masking stolen lives. And as analysts dug deeper, the pattern became terrifyingly clear, because Holloway didn't just move money overseas. He built a maze of 34 international properties, all undershell companies linked back to the Veterans Benefits Office, luxury apartments in Dubai, villas in Athens, commercial lots in Kuala Lumpur, each worth between $3 and $11 million. And on paper, these companies were supposed to stabilize veteran welfare portfolios. But in reality, they were anchor points in a global laundering network, with each property serving either as collateral for high-risk loans to wash cartel cash, or as safe houses for intermediaries moving units, the trafficked veterans, through international hubs. And what horrified investigators most was how smooth and legitimate everything looked, because every signature, every approval, every transaction passed internal checks. Since Holloway had exploited the one thing no cartel accountant could ever buy, the trust of a federal office. And when agents reviewed VA internal logs, they found hundreds of benefit accounts closed for relocation within minutes of each other. Yet none were flagged, because Holloway had rewritten the system's own alert parameters, engineering an algorithm that hid his crimes in real time, while millions drained out and the veterans tied to those accounts slept in shelters, cars, and abandoned rooms across Chicago. And the crypto trail was even worse, because cold wallets recovered from a South Side storage room revealed tens of thousands of microtransactions pushed through mixers to erase their origins. Except timing doesn't lie, and every crypto surge matched major seizures of cartel cocaine and fentanyl at the border. Meaning Holloway's stolen veterans' funds weren't just being laundered, they were synchronizing with narcotics revenue. Two empires feeding each other like twin heartbeats. And then came the detail that made agents physically recoil: a ledger titled Projected Asset Flow Q1. Q3 forecasting over $58 million in future transfers tied to newly identified candidates, who were actually living veterans listed by last name, diagnosis, and estimated liquidation value. And the final blow hit when analysts cross-referenced Holloway's digital signatures with flight data pulled after Iron Break, finding multiple matches authorizing medical escorts for outbound private jets, each linked to veterans now believed to have been sent into Dubai's forced labor network. And by dawn, the truth was impossible to deny. Holloway hadn't just stolen benefits, he had industrialized exploitation, turning public service into a revenue engine, trauma into collateral, and heroes into commodities. And as the financial map solidified, one chilling realization spread through the command room: no single man could run something this vast alone. Because the deeper the task force dug, the more the corruption spread outward into places where authority should have been unquestionable, revealing that Holloway hadn't just exploited the system, he had colonized it. Starting inside the Chicago Veterans Benefit Office, where audits showed counselors quietly flagging isolated, PTSD-stricken veterans and forwarding their files directly to Holloway for payouts of $2,000 to $5,000 per referral on prepaid cards, some counselors referring dozens, one referring 73, and worse, many incompetency rulings weren't even solo decisions. They were co-signed by a contract psychiatrist who never met a single patient, copy-pasting justifications to label veterans as high-risk liabilities, approving 64 false rulings in 2 years, all feeding a pipeline. And the rot went further, reaching O'Hare Airport, where customs officers authorized medical travel clearances for sedated veterans flown on private jets through maintenance corridors. with one supervisor approving all 17 flights tied to disappearances and quietly receiving $420,000 in unexplained deposits, while city licensing officials signed off on care facility zoning exemptions for buildings that turned out to be empty shells used only to launder paperwork before victims vanished overseas. All three officials later traveling to Dubai. And when cartel databases were cracked, investigators found a list labeled trusted influencers, government insiders who could fast-track paperwork, reroute shipments, or erase red flags, forming a protective lattice around Holloway's operation. And the most disturbing evidence of all came from encrypted messages seized in Nevada, showing Holloway in direct contact with a Sinaloa logistics coordinator, proving that what looked like corruption was actually a fully integrated machine. Still hiding pieces no one had uncovered yet. They kept sending messages asking for fresh inventory checks and availability forecasts, and every single line stripped real human lives down to numbers, quotas, and projected value, with worth calculated coldly based on military skills instead of humanity. And as the investigation widened, it pulled in even more people. A port inspector in Houston who waved through containers of fake medical equipment used to sedate kidnapped veterans. A loan officer in New York who rushed mortgages for Holloway's shell companies despite obvious red flags, and even a retired federal judge who had quietly dismissed early whistleblower warnings as unsubstantiated, protecting Holloway when his scheme was still young. And what shocked investigators most wasn't just how many people were involved, but how normal it all felt to them. Because everyone treated their role like routine paperwork. Just another signature, another form ignored, another veteran quietly erased by a system that was supposed to protect them. And by the end of the 6th week, the task force reached a terrifying realization. Holloway wasn't the heart of the operation at all. He was just the architect, because the network itself was alive, self-sustaining, self-protecting, and nowhere near fully exposed. And the closer agents came to pulling it apart, the heavier one fear became. If this many people were complicit, how many more were still waiting in the shadows for Holloway to fall so they could step in? And when dawn finally rose over Chicago, it came with a pale, metallic light that felt cold and indifferent, like the city refused to acknowledge the night it had just lived through. And for the task force, the sunlight brought no relief, because James Jack Holloway was still free, and his empire wasn't collapsing quietly. Then at 6:47 a.m., FBI surveillance watched his Lincoln Navigator roll into the driveway of a modest brick townhouse on Milwaukee Avenue. A safe house tied to a shell company traced straight to his Dubai brokers. And he stepped out calm and composed like he had been in government briefings for years. No panic, no rush. Just a man who believed he was untouchable. Until agents surged in, commands shouted, weapons raised. And for the first time, Holloway hesitated. Not from fear, but calculation. His eyes flicking toward the briefcase he carried. Later found to hold encrypted wallet keys, flight manifests, and a list of 19 more veterans scheduled for relocation. And when the cuffs clicked shut, he didn't fight. He just let out a slow breath, like someone ending a long performance. But the real shock hit back in the war room, where files from the townhouse revealed a continuation plan designed to keep the machine running without him. Automated withdrawals from dormant veteran accounts. Offshore brokers ordered to liquidate assets. Cartel partners told to accelerate intake, proving Holloway had planned for the world to keep bleeding even if he fell. And across 7 countries, arrests rolled in through the morning. Foreman detained in Dubai. A Cypriot banker caught trying to destroy records. The Houston port inspector intercepted while trying to flee by boat. And by 10:10 a.m., 143 people were in custody. Yet the victories felt empty, because a ledger listed 62 veterans still missing, scattered across deserts, work camps, and black market labor sites, reduced to numbers instead of names. And when prosecutors announced charges, the public erupted. But inside the task force, there was a darker understanding that Holloway wasn't an exception. He was a symptom, something he captured perfectly in his own handwriting. The system rewards efficiency. I merely applied it. And when he finally spoke in a quiet interview room at 11:54 a.m., asking if they really thought it would end with him, it wasn't a threat, it was a blueprint. Because while his empire had fallen, the darkness that allowed it was still alive. And this case became a reminder that justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens because agents stayed awake, followed every receipt, every ledger, every coded transfer. refusing to let silence win, standing up for veterans who could no longer stand for themselves. And that is the part people don't always see behind the uniforms and dawn raids, the patience, discipline, and moral courage. And in the end, this wasn't just about stopping one man. It was about proving that when corruption tries to turn systems against the vulnerable, there are still people willing to fight back and protect the dignity of those who once protected everyone else.